Welcome to the Shadow Crimes channel. I'm Sophia Turner, your friendly forensic medical examiner. Today we're delving into the Darlie Routier case, an intricate and emotional story that rocked the nation. Join me as we explore the evidence, testimonies, and controversies surrounding this tragic event. Please note that this video contains images related to the case, which may be disturbing to some viewers. Let's uncover the shadows together and remember that justice is always our guiding light. In the tranquil suburb of Rowlett, Texas, the evening of June 6, 1996 began like any other summer night. The Routier family resided in a charming two-story home where Darlie Routier, a 26-year-old mother of three, lived with her husband Darren and their children, Devon, age 6, Damon, age 5, and the youngest, an 8-month-old baby named Drake. Unbeknownst to them, this peaceful night would soon take a tragic turn, altering their lives forever and leaving the community stunned. As the day drew to a close, the Routiers followed their usual nighttime routine. After sharing a family dinner, the boys were tucked into bed and Darlie and Darren retired to their room for the night. The house settled into a calm slumber, the gentle hum of the air conditioning the only sound providing a backdrop of normalcy to the horrific events that were about to unfold. The family slept soundly, unaware of the nightmare that would soon shatter their idyllic world. Nestled in their beds, Devon and Damon dreamt of the innocent adventures that young boys do, while baby Drake slept peacefully in his crib. Darlie and Darren, no doubt, dreamt of their children's bright futures and the joys of raising a family together. However, the serenity of the night would soon be disrupted by a malevolent force, bringing darkness and devastation into their home. The once peaceful neighborhood would find itself at the center of a shocking crime that would become the subject of scrutiny, speculation, and heartbreak for years to come. In the early hours of June 6th, at approximately 2:30 a.m., Darlie Routier made a frantic call to 911, her voice filled with panic and desperation. She reported that an intruder had broken into their home, attacking her and her children. Darlie's chilling plea for help revealed that her two oldest sons had been stabbed and were unresponsive. Within minutes, police officers and paramedics arrived at the Routier residence, only to be met by a scene of unimaginable horror. Darlie, clad in blood-soaked clothing, had sustained multiple cuts and bruises on her body. Her injuries were severe, with a deep slash to her neck that had come within 2 millimeters of severing her carotid artery. The lifeless bodies of Devon and Damon bore witness to the gruesome nature of the attack. Both boys had been brutally stabbed, their young lives tragically cut short by an unknown assailant. Amidst the chaos and bloodshed, it seemed miraculous that the couple's youngest son, Drake, had escaped the violence unscathed, at least physically. The crime scene was a horrific display of violence and bloodshed that defied comprehension. The brutality of the attack, coupled with the tender ages of the victims, made it difficult for even the most seasoned investigators to process the tragedy unfolding before them. As first responders surveyed the carnage and tended to the survivors, it was clear that the Routier family's peaceful world had been irrevocably shattered, leaving behind a trail of grief and devastation. As the investigation into the Routier family's tragic ordeal commenced, inconsistencies in Darlie's account of the events began to surface, raising suspicions amongst law enforcement. Darlie's conflicting statements regarding the intruder and her actions during the attack led investigators to question her role in the tragic events. The forensic evidence found at the scene further fueled doubts about Darlie's story. Bloodstain patterns suggested that she may have inflicted her own injuries and staged the crime scene to make it appear as though an intruder had broken in. A bloodied sock, discovered in an alleyway near the Routier's home, containing both Devon and Damon's blood, as well as some of Darlie's skin, raised questions about her potential involvement. Darren Routier, Darlie's husband, initially supported her story of an intruder, but as evidence mounted, police began to scrutinize Darlie's role in the murders. With no signs of forced entry and a lack of physical evidence pointing to an unknown intruder, authorities became increasingly convinced that the answer to the horrific crime lay within the Routier family. Darlie's behavior in the aftermath of the attack also struck investigators and witnesses as unusual, further fueling speculation that she may have been involved in the deaths of her children. Reports of her demeanor being inconsistent with that of a grieving mother added to the mounting suspicions. As the tragic events of June 6th continued to unfold, the once tight-knit community found itself grappling with the chilling possibility that a loving mother could be capable of such unimaginable violence against her own children. The case would become a source of widespread fascination and debate, with many still questioning Darlie Routier's guilt or innocence to this day. Darlie's trial began in January 1997, drawing national media attention and a captivated audience eager to learn the truth behind the tragic events. Prosecutors argued that Darlie had killed her sons for financial reasons, painting a picture of a woman buckling under the weight of mounting debt and a lavish lifestyle that she and her husband could no longer sustain. The defense team, on the other hand, maintained Darlie's innocence, asserting that the physical evidence pointed to the involvement of an intruder. They contended that the prosecution's case was based on circumstantial evidence and that their client was a victim of both the horrific crime and a rush to judgment. Throughout the trial, the jury was presented with graphic crime scene photos and contradictory testimony, ultimately tasked with deciphering the truth behind the devastating events that unfolded on June 6th. The nation watched as the tragic story of the Routier family played out in the courtroom, with Darlie's fate hanging in the balance. In the end, the jury found Darlie Routier guilty of capital murder for the deaths of Devon and Damon. She was sentenced to death by lethal injection, a sentence that would later be commuted to life in prison in 2003 due to concerns about the fairness of her trial. Despite her conviction and incarceration, Darlie Routier has unwaveringly maintained her innocence, asserting that she was wrongfully accused and that crucial evidence in her case was overlooked or misinterpreted. Her relentless fight for freedom has garnered support from various advocates and organizations dedicated to overturning wrongful convictions. Over the years, several developments in Routier's case have given her and her supporters renewed hope. In 2008, a Texas court granted her request for DNA testing on some of the evidence, a significant breakthrough in her ongoing efforts to prove her innocence. However, the results of these tests remain pending, leaving many questions unanswered. In 2020, a new generation of supporters emerged, including a teenage crime sleuth named Ryan Kester, who believes that the evidence in the case was insufficient to support a guilty verdict. Kester has expressed interest in examining the original evidence in the case, hoping to uncover any information that could potentially exonerate Darlie. Today, Darlie Routier remains incarcerated at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. She continues to appeal her case and seek a retrial, clinging to the hope that one day she will be able to prove her innocence and find justice for her slain children. The tragic events of June 6, 1996, continue to haunt the Routier family, as well as the community that once embraced them. The case of Darlie Routier remains a polarizing topic, with some staunchly believing in her guilt and others maintaining that she was a victim of injustice. As the years pass, the nation continues to grapple with the unsettling questions and controversies that surround this chilling and heartbreaking case. As investigators delve deeper into the horrific events that unfolded in the early hours of June 6, 1996, they uncovered several key pieces of evidence that would ultimately shape the course of the case. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a bloodied sock found in an alleyway just 75 yards from the Routier home. This sock, which contained blood belonging to both Devon and Damon, as well as some of Darlie's skin, quickly became a focal point of the investigation. Prosecutors argued that the sock had been deliberately planted by Darlie as part of an elaborate attempt to stage a crime scene. Inside the Routier residence, investigators discovered a blood-stained knife on the kitchen counter. This knife, which would later be identified as the murder weapon, contained both Devon and Damon's blood. However, the absence of Darlie's fingerprints on the knife raised questions about her alleged role in the attack. The crime scene itself was a grisly sight, with blood splattered across the living room and a broken wine glass near the couch where Darlie claimed she had been sleeping. Investigators also noted inconsistencies in the blood spatter patterns and questioned the plausibility of Darlie's account of the attack. Darlie's medical examination following the incident provided further clues about the events that transpired that night. Her injuries, which included several deep cuts and bruises, were inconsistent with the severity of the wounds inflicted upon her children. This disparity led investigators to believe that Darlie's injuries may have been self-inflicted in an attempt to stage a struggle. As the investigation progressed, the evidence began to paint a chilling picture of Darlie Routier as a woman capable of unimaginable violence against her own children. Despite her unwavering claims of innocence, the evidence played a pivotal role in shaping the outcome of the trial and continues to fuel speculation and debate about the case to this day. The silly string evidence played a significant role in the trial of Darlie Routier, shaping the perception of her character and influencing the jury's decision. On what would have been Devon's 7th birthday, the Routier family held a celebration at their son's gravesite. During this event, Darlie was captured on video, smiling, laughing, and spraying silly string on the graves while her late son's friends and family members looked on. The prosecution used this footage to argue that Darlie's behavior was not in line with that of a grieving mother and suggested that her actions were indicative of her guilt. They contended that the video demonstrated Darlie's lack of remorse and her inability to appropriately mourn the loss of her children. This footage became a pivotal piece of evidence in the trial, portraying Darlie as callous and unemotional in the face of tragedy. The defense, however, argued that the silly string video was taken out of context and did not accurately represent Darlie's emotional state. They claimed that the celebration was a way for the family to honor Devon's memory and that Darlie's laughter was a momentary distraction from her overwhelming grief. The defense team attempted to humanize Darlie and showcase her as a loving mother who was unjustly accused and convicted. Despite the defense's efforts, the silly string video left a lasting impression on the jury and the public, ultimately contributing to Darlie Routier's conviction for the murder of her 2 sons. To this day, the footage remains a haunting reminder of the tragic events that unfolded in Rowlett, Texas, and continues to fuel debate over Darlie's guilt or innocence. As the investigation into the tragic events of June 6, 1996, progressed, authorities explored several potential suspects and leads in the Darlie Routier case. Despite the mounting evidence against Darlie herself, investigators meticulously pursued various theories to ensure that no stone was left unturned. One of the initial suspects was an unknown intruder. In Darlie's initial 911 call, she claimed that a man had broken into their home, attacking her and her children before fleeing the scene. Investigators conducted a thorough search of the neighborhood, examining nearby alleyways and streets for any signs of the alleged perpetrator. Another avenue explored by law enforcement was the possibility of a connection to a series of violent home invasions that had occurred in the Rowlett area in the months leading up to the Routier murders. The nature of these crimes, which involved intruders entering homes and attacking residents, led investigators to consider whether the same individual could be responsible for the brutal events at the Routier residence. The Rowlett Police Department also focused on individuals who may have had a motive to harm the Routier family. This included examining any potential enemies or acquaintances who might have harbored a grudge against Darlie or her husband, Darren. However, no clear connections to the crime were established. As the investigation unfolded, a surprising lead emerged from an unlikely source. A local woman claimed that her ex-boyfriend, who had a history of violent behavior, had confessed to her about his involvement in the Routier murders. This tip prompted authorities to examine the man's possible connection to the crime, but ultimately, they were unable to find sufficient evidence linking him to the scene or the events that transpired. Despite the numerous leads pursued by investigators, the evidence they gathered continued to point toward Darlie Routier as the primary suspect. While the search for other potential perpetrators played a crucial role in the investigation, the overwhelming amount of forensic evidence and inconsistencies in Darlie's account of the events ultimately led authorities to conclude that she was responsible for the tragic deaths of her 2 young sons. As the investigation into the Darlie Routier case deepened, several surprising elements emerged that added new layers of complexity and intrigue to the already tragic story. 1. The silly string video. During a celebration at her son's gravesite on what would have been Devon's 7th birthday, Darlie was filmed laughing and spraying silly string over the graves. This footage became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial, with the prosecution using it to argue that her behavior was not consistent with that of a grieving mother. The video raised questions about Darlie's emotional state and her ability to mourn the loss of her children. 2. The blood evidence. Forensic analysis of the crime scene revealed a series of unusual blood spatter patterns, including blood on the back of Darlie's nightshirt and blood droplets found under a vacuum cleaner. These patterns led investigators to question Darlie's account of the attack and raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been staged. 3. Darlie's diary entries. In the months leading up to the murders, Darlie wrote in her diary about the struggles she faced as a mother, including difficulties with her children and feelings of depression. Prosecutors used these diary entries to suggest that Darlie may have been overwhelmed by the pressures of motherhood and, in a moment of desperation, resorted to violence against her sons. 4. The mystery fingerprint. Investigators discovered an unidentified bloody fingerprint at the crime scene, which did not match any of the Routier family members or anyone else in the law enforcement database. The presence of this unknown print fueled speculation that an intruder may have been involved, despite the overwhelming evidence pointing toward Darlie's guilt. 5. Darren Routier's peculiar behavior. Throughout the investigation and trial, Darlie's husband Darren behaved in ways that struck many as unusual for a grieving father. In the aftermath of the murders, he appeared more focused on saving the family's possessions than on comforting his surviving son or seeking answers. While Darren never faced any charges, his actions raised questions about the dynamics within the Routier family and their potential role in the tragic events. These surprising elements of the Darlie Routier case continue to provoke discussion and speculation, contributing to the ongoing fascination with this tragic and perplexing story. Darlie Routier, now in her early 50s, is currently incarcerated at the Mountain View Unit, a women's prison located in Gatesville, Texas. Despite her continued insistence of innocence, she has spent more than 2 decades behind bars since her arrest in June 1996. In February 1997, Darlie was convicted of capital murder for the killing of her 2 sons, Devon and Damon. She was subsequently sentenced to death by lethal injection. However, in 2003, her sentence was commuted to life in prison after it was determined that her defense team failed to provide a fair trial, citing issues with inadequate legal representation and the prosecution's presentation of evidence. Darlie's fight for freedom has persisted throughout the years, with numerous appeals and requests for retrial submitted by her defense team. Despite her legal battles and unwavering support from family, friends, and advocates, she has yet to see her conviction overturned. As a high-profile inmate, Darlie has been the subject of several interviews and documentaries, maintaining her innocence and shedding light on her life behind bars. Her case continues to draw the attention of true crime enthusiasts who remain divided over her guilt or innocence. As it stands today, Darlie Routier remains incarcerated with a life sentence, and the tragic events that unfolded on June 6, 1996, continue to haunt the public's consciousness. The Darlie Routier case serves as a chilling reminder of the dark complexities that can surround the most unexpected individuals, leaving us to question our own preconceptions about motherhood, family, and the justice system. The investigation into the tragic events that unfolded in the Routier home on June 6, 1996, led authorities to designate Darlie Routier as the primary suspect, ultimately resulting in her conviction for the murder of her 2 young sons. The focus on Darlie as the main suspect can be attributed to several factors, including inconsistencies in her account of the events, forensic evidence, and behavioral patterns observed by law enforcement. 1. Inconsistencies in Darlie's story. From the outset, investigators noticed discrepancies in Darlie's account of the attack. Her story changed multiple times with differing descriptions of the intruder and the sequence of events. These inconsistencies raised doubts about her credibility and led authorities to question whether her version of events was accurate. 2. Forensic evidence. The blood spatter patterns found at the crime scene suggested that the murder weapon may have been handled by someone who was already inside the house, rather than an intruder. In addition, the blood on Darlie's nightshirt and the lack of her fingerprints on the knife used in the murders raised suspicions about her involvement. 3. Behavioral patterns. Darlie's behavior following the murders appeared inconsistent with that of a grieving mother, according to investigators. Witnesses reported that she seemed more focused on her own injuries than on her children's welfare. Additionally, the silly string video from Devon's birthday celebration at the gravesite portrayed her as detached and unemotional in the face of tragedy. Darren Routier, Darlie's husband, was initially considered a potential suspect, but investigators ultimately found no physical evidence linking him to the crime. Darren was cooperative with law enforcement and appeared to have a solid alibi, as he was asleep upstairs with the couple's youngest son at the time of the murders. As for an unknown intruder, investigators did consider this possibility, but were unable to find sufficient evidence to support the theory. There were no signs of forced entry, and the unidentified bloody fingerprint found at the scene could not be matched to any known individuals or suspects. The tragic and perplexing case of Darlie Routier has captivated the nation since the early hours of June 6, 1996. Here is a comprehensive timeline of the events that unfolded, from the horrific night of the murders to Darlie's ongoing fight for freedom. June 6, 1996. 1. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Darlie Routier calls 911, frantically reporting that her two sons, Devon and Damon, have been stabbed and that an intruder had broken into their home in Rowlett, Texas. 2. First responders arrive to find Devon and Damon gravely wounded, while Darlie suffers from knife wounds to her throat and right arm. 3. Devon and Damon are rushed to the hospital, where Devon is pronounced dead upon arrival. Damon succumbs to his injuries shortly after. June 18, 1996. Darlie and her husband, Darren Routier, hold a funeral for Devon and Damon, mourning their unimaginable loss. June 20th, 1996. Darlie Routier's 26th birthday. She and her family release balloons in memory of Devon and Damon at their gravesite. June 27th, 1996. Darlie Routier is arrested and charged with 2 counts of capital murder for the deaths of her sons. January 6th, 1997. Darlie Routier's trial begins in Kerrville, Texas. The prosecution argues that Darlie staged the crime scene and murdered her children, while the defense maintains her innocence. February 4th, 1997. After deliberating for just 10 hours, the jury finds Darlie Routier guilty of capital murder. February 5th, 1997. Darlie Routier is sentenced to death by lethal injection. February 18th, 1997. The Routier family files a motion for a new trial, citing inadequate legal representation and problems with the prosecution's presentation of evidence. March 2nd, 1997, Darlie Routier arrives at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, to begin serving her sentence. August 23rd, 1999, Darlie Routier's appeal is denied by a Texas appellate court. May 15th, 2003. Darlie Routier's death sentence is commuted to life in prison after new evidence casts doubt on the prosecution's case. 2008. A Texas court grants Darlie Routier's request for DNA testing on some of the evidence found at the crime scene. Results are still pending. 2020. A teenage crime sleuth named Ryan Kester takes an interest in the case, hoping to uncover information that could exonerate Darlie Routier. Darlie Routier's case remains a subject of fascination and debate, with many questioning her guilt or innocence. Today, she continues to serve her life sentence at the Mountain View unit, tirelessly fighting for her freedom and seeking justice for her slain children. 4 days after the Routier family laid Devon and Damon to rest in a heartbreaking funeral, Darlie Routier found herself at the center of a media firestorm as she was arrested and charged with 2 counts of capital murder for the deaths of her 2 oldest sons. The charges were based on the state's belief that Darlie had committed the crimes intentionally and with premeditation, challenging the nation's perception of motherhood and family. Thank you for joining us on this thought-provoking journey into the Darlie Routier case on the shadow crimes. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel for more captivating explorations of the darkest corners of the criminal world. We love hearing from you, so feel free to share your thoughts, questions, and theories about the case in the comments below. As we leave you with the lingering questions surrounding Darlie Routier, remember that the pursuit of truth and justice is an ongoing endeavor. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive into another chilling case that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until then, keep asking questions and never stop seeking answers. This is The Shadow Crimes, your partner in unraveling the mysteries of the human condition. Until we meet again, take care and stay curious.